Hi, welcome to my final presentation. Today we're going to be talking about functionalism in tabletop gaming, especially in Dungeons and Dragons, or D&D for short. Functionalism is defined as a sociological theory in which everyone has a certain role, or role's a good word, in which they serve to keep the group, the subculture, the society they're in moving forward, to keep it functioning. And so I thought that the function of D&D, as far as functionalism is concerned, would be something that would be kind of boring, because there's not. It's a game. So I decided I would look a little bit more at the functionalism within a D&D game. And so to that end, I had a few friends over, and we discussed a little bit. We riffed back and forth a little bit as to the different functions that could be served in a party. And so I'm going to cut you over to there, and I will see you again at the conclusion. Alright, so we now have Robbie, Sean, and Josh, as I mentioned before. And we're going to start with Robbie, and he's going to talk about what a dungeon master is, what their role is, because they're kind of one of the more important people.
The easiest way I have to explain what a dungeon master is would be, you're basically the engine for the game. You make the world around the players, and you run all the numbers, and all the random chance, things that affect your players and affect the world around them. Your goal is to basically make a seamless world that they're allowed to basically play in, like it's a sandbox. And you make nice toys and they break them, and that's basically the fun of the game. It's interesting to lead people on a story, but it's interesting to see the story they make on their own, and that's the most important part of D&D.
It's also probably the most challenging part of D&D as well, too, as the DM, is when the story is becoming their own.
Yeah, how to build a game and not let the players have too much reign, but still let them have all the fun.
There's definitely a delicate balance there.
Well, the question is if you want to push your story so hard that you end up railroading your players along, saying this is the only path you can take. Like, I'm famous for when I was younger actually killing party members because they weren't following my story. So that's something you eventually grow out of, or hopefully you never develop in the first place. But it's that delicate balance, like you said. You want to tell them a story, but you also want them to be part of that story. You don't want the players to feel like they're apart from the world. You want them to feel like they are a moving, breathing part of this world, and everything around them is affected by what they do. So, if you're killing a dragon, you don't want them to walk to the next town and be like, who's this random asshole? This is the dragon's lair. People should know about that. Someone should have come by and said the dragon that's marauding has been killed, and these are the people who did it. So, you want to make your party feel like they're part of your world, and eventually you basically give them the run of it. And that's the fun of the game. It gives them a chance to make their own stories in a world you create for them.
So, your role's kind of to make sure that the world's there, kind of like a world builder, and just to make sure everyone has fun.
Yeah, that's the biggest
just
part.
kind of sum it up there.
You're there to make them feel like heroes in a story of their own.
Alright. So, anybody else got anything they want to add about that?
Really, it's just about having fun and making sure that not just the players, but you yourself are having fun as well, too. Just kind of going off what Robbie was saying there about his early days, where everybody's going, if you're going into a Robbie campaign, you knowing that your character's going to be dead, is it going to be fun for you too much? Not exactly, but that's why you evolve, you learn more things, you get to see what makes this player want to play, what makes this player pretty much want to say, I'm done for the night, or not show up for sessions and whatnot. So also understanding that party dynamic as well as people's feelings as well too. So I wouldn't always say it's a guidance counselor job in a little bit there, but it almost feels like it is sometimes because you're managing all these relationships to make sure everybody has a good time.
Yeah, you'll hear a lot of people joke about D&D as the DM is the parent of the group, which isn't true, but sometimes it feels like it.
Yep, I will agree. It can feel like it sometimes. All right, so now I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the roles that players can fill inside of a party.
All right, well, I'll go over just kind of the basics, and these guys can elaborate. I spend more time behind the screen. So, your basic party boils down to one melee class that will be kind of a bullet sponge to stand in front of the rest of the party. You'll have one healer, which can be anything of a million things, but cleric is the standard D&D for the healer. And finally, you'll have your damaging and your utility classes.
Utility class, I like that description.
Damage is the class that'll be something like a mage, something that does big, showy things and can take down a large group of people.
I'm cast this giant fireball that's going to come down on my enemy and destroy everything. That kind of big flashy is going to be your damage stuff there.
And then your utility class is more designed for subtle operations, where maybe blowing up the side of a building isn't quite the right choice. Someone who can get past a locked door, talk a guard down, knows who to find to get something done without maybe implicating what you guys are doing. So,
and heck, there's even distractions. There's just somebody that goes out there and makes the biggest show about it, so everybody's not paying attention at all.
it is, when you think of a utility class, usually you do think of a sneaky person, but
sometimes that's not always the case.
And in D&D, the biggest utility class is actually the bard, who's famous for standing in front of crowds and yelling at them. So
that's probably my favorite class to play.
Right.
It does.
In general.
It takes a lot of character, and you can also get you can get the utility out of it, and also they can sometimes work as a healer, but maybe these guys have explanations of something that crosses the archetypes.
So definitely, like, you got your solid, as they said, you got your big guy up front, as most people commonly refer to as the tank, the big melee guy who'll take all the hits. You got your big flashy spellcaster guys, and you got your healers, which can range anywhere from, as we mentioned, Bard, but also to our Cleric subtype, which can also be pretty powerful in its own right. Some things that players can also do is they can kind of cross their skills. There are several classes in the game that allow you to be more than just one type, a multi-class, or multi-role, I should say, actually, where you can be like, oh, I'm going to deal damage, but I'm also going to stay back and heal this person if they're hurt. So my personal favorite is playing a certain type of character that is able to do that can cross those two bridges when need to. Yes, there's ways you can so-called break the rules, or you can be a master of both, but it's not exactly intended to be that way. You're just more like, I can perform adequately in these certain roles, but I'm not going to be the best damage dealer, or I'm not going to be the best healer in the group and whatnot. There are better options, but for the roles I pick, I like to go ahead and combine those roles so I can fulfill multiple things there in the group.
Yeah, you're able to trade off from being excellent at one very specific thing into being great at two separate things.
Exactly. So, and that's something that I like to do all the time. So I know it can definitely, especially with groups when you play when there's not many players, I know that can definitely be a challenge. Having that person that can fill multiple roles is definitely a huge benefit to help progress the game when we're in a smaller group setting.
I always find it more fun to specialize more, because I do like the multifaceted classes where you can have two different classes where you can go somebody that's going to be more damage and then something more utility in with it. But I don't know. I've always found it really fun to hone in on one type of class. Always be super badass at that.
Well, it's something like if we go ahead and talk about the Bard, for example, they're an okay healer. Let's laugh at their combat skills. Let's just do that real quick. They're not much of combat, but one thing that we touched on was the skill-based characters about, there's this guard here that if I can talk my way past him, if I'm able to use my words correctly, and honestly with the right rolls on the dice, because let's face it, that's also why we play the game, you can pretty much have a character who does no combat at all. He doesn't do any healing, but is able to connive his way out through any situation, just based on skills like that. Yeah, I mean, and it doesn't have to fall in line with your typical thing. Hell, we know a person who played a merchant one game. He just had all of his points into like, I'm going to appraise things, I'm going to buy and sell, because money can buy anything. It can buy me an army, and it pretty much did.
Yeah. In that same game, I was playing a character that was so good at lying, everyone believed that he had a magical tongue that would ensorcel anyone who heard it. But he didn't. He was just that good at lying.
Though several people did want that tongue out of your mouth for exactly that reason.
So.
Sometimes the lie can get a little too big, but that's also part of the world building. Like I said, when those boasts come back to haunt you.
D&D it's very much collective storytelling.
It's collective storytelling where people fill in a role as far as like if you're playing the Lord of the Rings, it's like I want to be Legolas. I want to be that archer that rides down the stairs on a shield, grabbing arrows out of people and shooting them right back at them. I mean, in the world that you can playing in D&D, that's entirely possible with the luck of the dice, and just being able to imagine and share those experiences as well is part of the awesomeness of the game, in my opinion.
I mean, some of the best elements of that game is just the free will in general.
And honestly, something that most people know is, as a DM, sometimes you maybe push a dice in a certain direction to make things look a little bit better. Something has to look just a little bit cooler, and you're like, well, maybe you add something to that.
Because like we say, that's the DM's role. Make sure it's fun. Make sure it looks cool. Make sure
everyone's
enjoyable
having
for
fun.
everyone.
Right. Exactly. Because let's face it, not everybody likes to roll those natural ones out there. They don't like having those fumbles and whatnot. But
don't?
No, I don't like it. I don't like it experiencing it, but the actual, the fallout, the actual hearing is like, what happens to my character? What do other people do? What's around? How badly did I mess this up? That's a little bit of the excitement as well, too.
That's true.
Because everybody gets to have a laugh at the end. It's like, oh, remember that time when you fell on your sword when you went to go ahead and two-handed this guy? Yeah, everybody does, because you killed yourself.
And yeah, that excitement, those just moments where everyone gets to cheer, everyone's happy, you've beaten the monster, you've saved the day. Or sometimes it's just something as simple as you all got out of it alive and you're happy to get there.
Or even sometimes, when you get to see other people's creativity or their imagination, what they do with their class or what the abilities they have at their disposal there. It's like, that's something I've never thought of before. We can go ahead and do that kind of thing. So it really encourages that creative side as well, too, out of people.
The best thing is when the party starts suspecting someone that you had no intention of even being an important character, and all of a sudden you have a new bad guy, and he gets a cloak, and he goes back and starts plotting.
Oh, you remember that dog at the beginning of the campaign with the shifty eyes? Well, he's back, guys.
Oh, no.
All right, so Josh, why don't you tell us about a character you've played before, just a little bit about him.
A character I've played before. We'll go with the very first character I ever played for D&D. It was my introductory character, and it was a monstrous campaign. So that's when people would, instead of taking your typical races like your elf, your dwarf, your gnome, or human, you instead decide, oh, you see that gelatinous cube? I'm going to play a gelatinous cube. So I did that with this session, and I played at the time it was called an assassin jelly, which was pretty much a blob of material that would go around killing people in the shadows. And it was fun. It was my first introduction. It was a lot more bitten off than I could chew at the time. If you ever decide to play, go with a basic setting, low level. Don't start off at epic level monster characters, because that is definitely overbearing. But the role of the character at the time was to be the sneak. He was a rogue. He had classes in rogue. He was going to be sneaking around. He was going to be taking out my enemies in the silence, because I had the ability to pretty much move without making a sound. I could go ahead and slip through any crack because my body can morph to whatever shape it could. So that was just kind of the role I filled in the party, and at the end of the day, everybody blew up because DM decided that things were getting way out of hand. So he pulled a Deus Ex out of nowhere and just ended the session. still, it was a good little introduction. It got me kind of saying, I really want to get more into this game. And eventually I found like what my niche role is, what I feel more comfortable with, and that comes down to the healer class, the healing and the damage class. So, like I said, in D&D, there's plenty of classes that will overlap each other. You can fulfill multiple roles, and those are kind of things that I like to go to. But if you were to put like a generic label on me, it's going to be that, God, I don't know, healer or hotshot DPS. I'm not sure if I want to put either title over me, but that's just kind of how I feel. I could go either one of those paths, kind of thing.
All right. So when you started, you kind of filled the rogue, the sneak function, kind of helped the party sneak into places, and you've moved more to the keep them alive.
Exactly. There was I don't know if there was an exact turning point in one of the campaigns I played where I had maybe like everybody die in a session. We're like, why didn't we have a healer? Well, nobody wanted to play the healer because typically people associate the healer with being, I stay back in the group, I cast lay on hands, heal people, and I don't have much action. I go around and I pray to my god because that's what you do to gain spells as a cleric. So I could see people not really wanting to go down that line because they have that general view of what a cleric should be. But that's the beauty of D&D is that you can make that cleric be whatever the hey you want it to be.
Oh, heck yeah.
You could be an evil cleric. You can be a neutral cleric who's just chills there. He's like, what have you done for me lately? You haven't done this? I guess you're not getting that heal then. So, I mean, there's different ways. Like, your experiences kind of develop what kind of characters you play. And eventually, if you continue playing with the same group of players, they're going to go ahead and kind of put that label on you. It's like, this guy will play this class no matter what. If we need to fill a role, this guy will take care of that role we need filled kind of thing. So, in a way, it's nice to be dependent on that way, but in other ways, like, there'll be that time it's like, I want to be playing that meat shield, or I want to be playing that big flashy mage kind of thing. So, it's, yeah.
And at the other end, we have people who are usually guest players, and so they don't get pigeonholed into a role. They get told, we don't have this right now, so we need you to play this type of character.
Exactly.
That's usually me, actually.
That's what I was about to say.
Yeah. More often than not, that's what I like especially about what I've been experiencing from Dungeons & Dragons, is like, I have played almost every single class, but I've never mastered any of them beyond level 3 usually, because I don't usually get more than 1 or 2 sessions, but I think my favorite character, I've had 2 favorite characters, they were both temporary. One was Pepper. She was an interesting and rambunctious little lady. Her name is Pepper. She's great with the colors. I loved getting to have her spin around, cutting things up as a whirling dervish. She just was feisty. From the very second she started that campaign, she wanted to fight people. But my other favorite guest one right now, I'd have to say, would be that Loxodon I played recently with your group.
Yeah.
Where within the very first few seconds of us starting into the introduction of it, I had already thrown us completely off the entire campaign.
Yep.
Alright, God, you know about Cranko? Yeah, we all know about Cranko, right, guys?
I'm little didn't know.
You're in a military headquarters. What the fuck are you doing? Oh, I'm making a big mistake is what I'm doing.
And that's why you should know what kind of world you're playing in before you start talking. Also, the beauty of being able to create your own world is that you can surprise players with that information. Or if you're playing in a pre-built world like this one, you can use that information and be like, why'd you say that?
Oh, you did just say we're doing that, huh?
A thing that most players won't do is look around before they start speaking. Sometimes you'll just start shouting in the middle of a hallway, and then the orcs start running out because you're shouting in the middle of a hallway.
Are you shouting? Oh, yeah. Oops.
Paladin trying to sneak down the hallway in his plate armor.
Oh, no.
Clank, clank, clank.
Exactly.
Some players just can't fill certain roles.
Nope.
Well, the paladin could take his armor off, but I'm not sure if that makes him very useful anymore.
Exactly.
And the paladin's another example of a class that actually straddles a line. A paladin can be a frontliner, someone who can absorb those blows and fight in melee, but a paladin also can heal.
Yes,
They can't heal super well, but they can heal.
But they can keep people alive.
I mean, that divine shield.
They can
that
heal
get
better
in
than
the-
a warrior.
In 5th edition, though, man, when they get that divine shield, they can make people just resistant to anything, it seems.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah, paladins have gotten a definite shift in power over the last couple editions of the game.
Like
But is it
the
a shift
utility
in their
almost.
focus, though? Like, a paladin in 3rd edition is actually a pretty balanced character, like I was saying.
Mhm.
Is the paladin in 5th edition more offensive now?
I feel it's more utility now. Like,
Yeah.
it still
Or have they
has
given
that.
it a larger selection of spells?
They've given them a larger selection of abilities, made them more of a utility class,
Okay.
where you can build them as a tank, or you can build them as a healer, or actually those are still basically your only choices. But they give you more ways to do both of those now.
That's good.
And that's nice. It's better from a storytelling perspective to have those kind of options, because, and especially the older systems of the game, it will give you kind of a skeleton and you have to make up special things to add on to it, to add your own flair to it. Like, if you imagine original D&D is basically trying to carbon copy the Lord of the Rings,
Yeah.
then as time moves on and these ideas of these characters gets more advanced, you can see changes in them. Like, the clerics in 1st edition D&D could wear light armor, couldn't use shields, couldn't use any kind of martial weapons. Flash forward, now they can use shields, they can wear heavy armor, they're actually legitimate frontliners as well as being a support class.
The game
They
has
can
evolved.
Yep.
Like, as people play, they're probably saying, like, hey, this is what I want my character to be. What are the rules for this? So,
Yeah.
And as time goes on, it's just increased the amount of stuff you can do as a single type of character. Like, once again, back in the older editions, the only thing that could be any kind of class was a human. But now you can play anything you want, up to an assassin, shouting
Yeah.
rogue, and you can make that kind of thing work, and you can tell the story of some kind of ooze that's come up from the ground and has decided it needs to murder everyone around it.
Yeah.
But those are the kind of stories you can tell now. And that's the nice part about the game, is it has the functionality to tell those stories, and you don't have to feel limited by the rules that much anymore. It's more of a framework instead of a actual hard and fast rule set.
So we've been talking all this time about how D&D works and rules within the game. What would you say the function of tabletop gaming is in overall society?
Well, I think it's different for different people. As for me, when I started playing D&D, I was 14 years old and an incredibly nerdy video game player who had no social contact. I make the joke that my first D&D session was my friends in chess club throwing me into a van, throwing player's handbook into my hands and saying, read this before Friday.
I don't think you're kidding anymore.
Well, I showed up that Friday, and I'm the kind of person that picks a bard, because what's the point in life if you can't have at least a chuckle?
My first character was a bard too.
Dear Lord, really?
And it really helped me break out of my shell and be able to talk to people. Especially when, after about 3 weeks passed by, someone handed me the Dungeon Master Guide and said, just try this. I promise you'll get to play the game again someday.
Someday.
It's been a while. But it always gives me a chance to really enjoy, when you're not running a game, the social aspect of being there with your friends trying to solve the problem. Because as a Dungeon Master, most of the time you're an entertainer and you're making the puzzle for them to solve rather than being an active part of solving it. So, for a Dungeon Master, it gives you a really good sense of like world building. It teaches you how to tell the story. And it teaches you how to organize. It teaches you have to be organized to make things run. But as a player, it's an amazing social game. It's a game where you can see aspects of people that you've never seen before because they're willing to go out there and take a risk because they know no one in that area, in that room, is going to judge them for taking those risks. And I think that's the biggest part of D&D. I think it gives people who have a hard time socializing an outlet where they can actually go and have fun and be themselves for once. That's at least in my opinion. What do you guys think?
That's, I mean, you hit the hammer on the nail right there. It's that social aspect of being with your friends, seeing what they could do, the creativity, the imagination that comes out, the laughing at the good times, the making fun of people at the bad times. Like, you say you don't judge when people do antics. Oh, there's judging that happens. Don't get me wrong, but it's good humor judging. I'd say something where you all laugh about at the end. But that's really what it is. It's a social gathering of people with like-mindedness that want to come together, have a good time, and play a game together.
Yeah, but
So it serves the same function as like a poker night.
Exactly.
Or
I was just going to say that.
though I would say it forces more interpersonal communication than those things.
Oh yeah.
You can go golfing for an entire day and talk about nothing.
Yep.
But if you've managed to make up an adventure together, it gives you something more. Something that, yes, you can talk about your golf scores 10 years from now, but is that going to be as funny as the time the guy fell on the goblin and stabbed himself?
Or the time where somebody decided to blow up the entire city and leave it in a crater.
Because
Putting on a magical artifact that, whatever, like just having those stories in the back of your head and coming down 10 years later.
Or when that
sharing those stories.
100% human guy scared an ogre by going, ah!
Some days you don't make that check. Some days you just break and run.
You know, I think there's another great thing about D&D's functionality. Is for me, what got me into D&D, escapism was definitely part of it. But I felt that I did it originally to keep my acting going. It helped me keep balance to my chops because I got to try out different characters. I got to play with different accents. Got to play around and just be creative.
So for you, it helps to serve to help your career as well as
I mean, like you look at Vin Diesel, you look at
Tom Holland.
Tom Holland. They love to do D&D on the set. I think even Ryan Reynolds does it. And I think it really stimulates the brain. It really keeps you ready and willing to just indulge in the creative aspect of yourself. So that's what I got to do it for, at least. And to practice math, because apparently I love doing math.
There's not as much math as anyone says there is. Please don't be put off by it.
And it's all simple math now. Back in the day, it was multiply this by this, and
but this
add
is happening
X,
while that happened.
But now it's 5 + 2 = 7. All right, guys. Well, thank you all for sitting here and talking with me today.
You're welcome.
And I hope we can get together and have something, do this again soon.
Sounds good.
Alright, so I think there was some good takeaways there. I actually wasn't able to find as much on this particular topic as I thought I'd be able to when I started my researching. There's just, from what I've been able to find, not very many sociologists that have gone within the game. There have been a few that have sought out the purpose that the game serves in our everyday society. But I did find one paper that talks about going into the game and establishing realism or anti-realism in a fantastical setting as a sociological phenomenon. And I've included a link to that paper in the description of this video. As we conclude, I just wanted to touch on the ability of tabletop gaming to mirror our society as a whole. The way that players and dungeon masters can take on roles that they're familiar with in real life, or if they'd prefer, ones that they could never touch in real life. I've played in many a game where some random character has become so rich and powerful that they have taken up a lordship and bought a castle and started collecting taxes and fulfilling a totally different role than they ever did in real life. Thanks for watching. Have a good semester break.